Today we're looking at function notation. As you can see from the objective here, there's quite a few things that we're going to be doing. One of them is students will compare and contrast representations of characteristics of equation notation and function notation. Students will also be identifying the benefits of characteristics of function notation. And you'll also be applying function notation in problem situations to find specific function values. So, sounds like a lot, and it is, but it does go by fairly quickly. All right, so the first thing we need to get straight is we have two things here. We've got something called the function notation that we're going to be working with today. Functions can be written in two different formats. We got the y equals, which most of you guys have already seen. You guys probably done this back in junior high. What we're going to look at today is something called the f of x notation, function notation. And you'll notice here, these are very similar here. The only difference between this one and this one is that the y has been replaced with the f of x. This here is very similar to this one. The only difference is instead of using a y, we're using a g of x. Same thing here. The only difference is instead of a y, we have h of x. And the only difference here is instead of y, we're using a j of x. So really the only thing that's changing is the y to a letter with an x in parentheses. That's the only thing that's changing here. So that f of x format is called function notation. So what I want you to do is circle that word for me. Function notation. This is what we're going to be working with today. Function notation. And that function notation has two benefits over the y equal format. And here they are. The first one, it gives different functions their specific names. In other words, the f of x denotes a specific rule, and g of x represents a different rule. So it helps us keep things straight. The next one says it can be used to designate what values to evaluate. If it is written as f of 2, it means to find the rule of f by substituting an a, or substitute in a 2, which is exactly what we're going to be working with here in a second. So these are the two benefits of using function notation over the y. Now let's actually do the function notation. All right, so in this first example, they have given me a rule, a function, and that rule is f of x is equal to 3x plus 5. What they want me to do is find a couple of things. They want me to find f of negative 2. They want me to find f of 1/3. They want me to find f of 0. They want me to find negative f of 5. They want me to find f of j. And they also want me to find f of g. So they're actually asking for 6 different things here. And we're going to find all 6 of them pretty much the same way. Now I realize they didn't give you a whole lot of room to work here, guys, so you're going to have to write pretty small to get all 6 of them in that little space that they give you. So don't write too big here. All right, so we're going to start with the first one. Number 1, we're going to find f of negative 2. And the way we're going to find f of negative 2 is by using this rule right here. All we're going to do is we're going to replace this x that we have with the number in parentheses. So we're going to replace the x with the number negative 2. Everything else is going to stay the same. Notice how I still have the 3 there. I still have the plus 5. All I've done is replace this x with the number negative 2. That's the first thing we're going to do. Take out the x and replace it with whatever number they give you. That's your first step. The second step is to find out what that value is. Now we can either do this by hand or we can actually just put it in the calculator. Which would you prefer? Calculator. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the calculators. Let's have these 2 rows. Go ahead and grab your calculators for me. Grab your calculator. And then the rest of you guys go ahead and get your calculator. Alright, so I'm going to show you how to type it in exactly like we said so that we make sure that we get the correct answer. That way there's no mistakes here.
-1. I got -1.
So what we're going to do is we're going to type it in exactly like you see how I have it written down here. So you're going to type it in with a 3. Then you're going to get these little parentheses here, which you can find right above the number, what is it?
8 and 9.
8 and 9. So you're going to do 3 parentheses, -2. By the way, the negative sign is right next to the enter button. Close that parenthesis, and then +5. And then from there, all you got to do is hit enter. And you got what?
-1.
-1. There it is. Voila. You got your answer. That's it. Those are the 2 steps. You plug in the number for X, put it in your calculator, you got your answer. Let's try it with another one. Let's try that again. This time what I'm going to do, still using the same rule here, take out the X, but this time what am I going to use?
1/3.
This time I'm using
1/3.
1/3. Now let me show you a little trick here, guys. Everybody follow with me on your calculators. On your calculator, go ahead and hit clear. Clear your screen. What I want you to do is hit the number 3 first, then parenthesis, right above the 8. I'm going to show you how to get 1/3 on your calculator. There's a way that we can do this so that it looks just like a fraction. You're going to hit the green button first. Green button, and then the Y equals. Green button and Y equals. Y equals is the very top left-hand corner. Very top left-hand corner. Green button. Now when you do that, a little screen on the bottom left-hand corner is going to pop up. If you look at number 1 says N/D, right? N stands for numerator. D stands for denominator. That's exactly what we have here. We have a fraction that has a numerator and a denominator. So select that first one for me. Hit enter. And what you're going to notice now is now you have a little fraction with 2 little boxes, right? You got a top box to put your numerator, which in our case is a 1. And then you got another box at the bottom of that so that you can put your denominator, which in our case is the 3. Then you can hit the right arrow key so that you can move over and close the parentheses.
6.
Close the parentheses. Don't forget to put the +5 after that. And after you got all that in, then you can hit enter. And what's the number we're going to get? 6. There it is. That's your answer to F of 1/3. 6. Let's try the next one. F of 0. We're going to use the same rule again. But this time I'm taking out the X and replacing it with a 0. So it's going to look like this here. So put that in your calculator and see what you get this time. 5. Therefore, F of 0 is equal to a 5.
-F.
Now here, the next one's going to be a little bit tricky. So let me show you what we're going to do with this next one. On this next one here, you'll notice that there's a negative sign in front of the F. Just ignore that negative sign for a minute here. We'll come back to that later. Just forget it for right now. Let's keep doing what we were doing earlier. Let's take out the X, and let's start by replacing it with a 5. We're doing the same thing we did earlier.
It's 5.
Put that in your calculator,
20.
and you're going to get a
20.
20. But that's not the answer.
-20.
And that's because there's a negative sign here. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that 20 you got on your calculator, and we're going to multiply it with this negative sign. So a negative times a 20 is actually going to make this a -20. So whatever number we get, we're going to have to multiply it by a negative sign. Or think of it kind of like we're multiplying by -1. Now on the next example, you'll notice instead of giving me a number, this time what they've done is they've given me a letter, a variable. But we're going to do the same process, guys. We're still going to take out X. And what are we going to replace the X with this time?
A J.
A J. Everything else, just like we've done before.
But you can't put J.
That's right. You can't put J in your calculator. So don't. Do not put the j in the calculator. But you should know what you get when you multiply a 3 times a j. Does anybody know what you get when you multiply 3 times a j?
8.
Kind of a trick question.
3.
Part of it.
I got 5.
3 times a j is a
3J.
3j. That's right, 3j. Of course, don't forget about the plus 5 that we also have here. So the answer here looks a little funny. It's going to be 3j plus 5.
So whatever number is 5, you get that number and put a J.
That's right. That's right. Number 6 is the same thing. You'll notice they give you a letter again.
3G.
So we're going to do 3
It's like 15.
in parentheses g.
Plus 5.
Plus 5.
Of course, you can't put this one in the calculator either, so we're going to just multiply 3 times the g. 3 times the g is a 3g plus 5. 3g plus 5. So again, let me break it down what we've done here. All we did was take out the x and replace it with the number they gave us. -2, then we put in a 1/3, then we put in a 0, then we put in a 5, then we put in a j, and then a g. So whatever's in parentheses, that's what you're plugging in for x. It doesn't matter what it is, that's what you need to plug in for x. All right, let's try a couple more here. Number 1. For number 1, this time they give me a different rule. This time the rule we're using is 2x squared plus 1. So, first I'm going to go ahead and replace the x with a -2. Everything else remains the same. Notice I still have a 2, still got the plus 1, still got the squared. The only thing that's changed is x has been replaced with a -2. The nice thing is all you got to do is put it in your calculator. So put in your calculator exactly like I have it written on the board. Use parentheses, guys. Use parentheses like I did. If you don't know where the square button is, let me know and I'll point it out to you. It's 2, parentheses, -2, parentheses squared, plus 1. And what are we going to get? 9. That is correct. The answer should be 9. Let's try another one. Same rule. This time we're plugging in a -1. Put that in your calculator. See what you get.
3.
+3, -3.
-3.
Three.
Positive.
Positive 3. Positive.
Trick me.
That's right. The next one they ask us to find is g of 0. So, let me see here. Let's take out the x and replace it with a 0. So we have 2, parentheses 0, parentheses squared, plus 1. Put that in your calculator, see what you get. 1. Keep going. G of 5. We're using the same rule. We're going to replace the x with a 5. So now we've got 2, parentheses 5, parentheses squared, plus 1. And what are we going to get this time?
51.
51. 51. And the next one, be careful on the next one here. Next one, instead of a number, now I've got a letter here.
2 squared. 2J squared.
All right. So we're going to have 2j squared
Plus 1.
plus 1. So again, really all we're doing is taking out the x and replacing it with the letter j.
Next code.
Pretty easy so far, right? Nothing fancy here, pretty straightforward. All we're doing is taking out the x, putting in the number. Now, the next one, number 2, notice the rule has changed. Now instead of 2x squared plus 1, now what we're working with is x divided by 3. So, let's find this first one here, h of 0. So I'm replacing my x with a 0. So the question is, what is 0 divided by 3?
0.
0. So your first answer is 0. The next one, This time they gave me a negative 12. So if I replace the x with a negative 12, what's a negative 12
-4.
divided by 3?
-4.
Negative 4. Right? Negative 12 divided by 3. Negative 4. Next one. This time I'm replacing my x with a 3. So I need to know what is 3 divided by 3. 3 divided by 3 is, no, not 0, it's 1. Now let's slow it down on the next one, because the next one we have a fraction here. So on the next one, the x is being replaced with 1/3, and we're going to divide that 1/3 by 3. So I just showed you how to use your calculator to put in a fraction. So let's do the green button, and then y equals, green button, and then y equals. That little screen is going to pop up. We're going to use the first one, number 1. That's going to allow you to type in your fraction, your numerator and your denominator. Of course, 1 is your numerator, 3 is your denominator. Once you have the fraction typed in, then you're going to do divide by 3.
It's 1.
It's going to be what?
1.
Nope. 1, 9. 1 over 9. This should be 1 over 9. Double check how you typed it in. If you didn't type it in correctly, obviously you're going to get the wrong answer. It's the green button, and then y equals. So it's 1/3. Make it over. Divided by. And hit enter, and you should get your 1/9. And the last one over here, h of f. All we're doing is replacing the x with an f. So if we do that, what do we end up with? F of 3. Well, not f of 3, but f divided by 3. F divided by 3. F divided by 3. All right, on number 3 and number 4, I'm only going to do one. The first one out of each one, because then in a minute I'm going to have you go back and finish that up. Okay? So let's take a look at number 3. The rule they give me on this one is 2x. So I'm going to replace the x with a what? A 0.75. So put that in your calculator so that we can see what is 2 times 0.75. 1.5. There it is. So you're going to do the others for me in a minute. Let's go to number 4 so you can have an example of that. For number 4, again, the rule has changed. Now I've got 7 minus 3x. So what we're going to do is we're going to replace the x with a 4.
You can't do that in the calculator. Compare it.
No, you should be able to do that
I can't do it. Here.
on this one. It's 7, then the minus sign, 3 parentheses, 4 parentheses. It should be a negative.
I put the negative fraction minus.
All right, so you're going to finish up the other ones here in a minute. So you'll come back and finish that up. Let's go ahead and turn the page. Turn the page. On the next page, it says that 2 area distributors, Barking Lot Grooming and Tidy Paws, sell and deliver the same kind of shampoo for dogs and cats to area veterinarian clinics. The function used by each distributor to calculate the cost to the clinics are given below. So, for Barking Lot Grooming, they use the equation y equals 5x plus 3 to determine how much they're going to charge. Tidy Paws over here, they use the equation y equals 3x plus 21. It says that if both dependent variables are written as the y, it's hard to distinguish which equation represents each distributor. In other words, guys, look up here. If I gave you these 2 equations, and I didn't give you this part right here, would you be able to tell which was which? No, it's too hard to tell which one is the Tidy Paws, and it's too hard to tell which one is the Barking Lot Grooming. So what we can do to fix that is instead of using these y's here, we can use something a little different. And that's what this part down here says. In order to keep track of several functions, it is sometimes necessary to distinguish them with a name. This is done by putting the function in that f of x notation. So notice down here. It still says 5x plus 3, right?
Yes.
It still says 3x plus 21. The only thing we're going to change is the y. We're going to change it to a b of x. On this one over here, instead of using y, we're going to use a p of x. So let me time out here. Why did they use b for this one?
For barking.
For barking, so that we know that we're talking about the barking lot grooming. Why did they use a p on this one?
For pause.
For pause. So now think about it, guys. If I leave this part out, you didn't have this to look at. And I gave you these two right here. And I said, which one goes with the tidy pause?
Yes.
Now you can tell them apart, right? You know that this one is because it has the P. So I ask you, which one is the barking lot grooming? Well, now it's easier to tell because you got a B here. So it helps us tell them apart. That's why we're using this notation instead of just using these Y's here. That's the only reason we're doing that right now. All right, so number 5. What difference do you observe in the cost function written in f of x notation? Well, we've kind of discussed that already, guys. The expression remains the same. The only thing that changes is the y into a letter next to x in parentheses. And I'll go back and show you again in a minute exactly what I'm talking about. The expression remains the same, only the y changes into a letter next to x in parentheses. And I'll go back to those examples so you can see it, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. All right, so again, the only difference is the fact that we changed the y into a letter next to x in parentheses. The expression itself remains the same. So let me go back over here so you see. The only thing, or what stayed the same was this here, 5x plus 3. This over here stayed the same, 3x plus 21. What we said is the only thing that changed was we went from a y to a letter with a x in parentheses. This one went from a y to a p with x in parentheses. That's the only difference between these two things. Everything else is the same. All right, let's keep going here. Number 6. What symbols are used to represent the dependent variables? Well, first of all, dependent, those are the y's. Now, what were we using for the y's? Well, it depends on which one we're talking about. We use b of x for the barking lot grooming. We use p of x to represent for the tidy pause. This is what we use for our y values. It's dependent. So b of x again is barking lot grooming, p of x tidy pause. Each of those represents the dependent variable. Number 7, they want us to write an ordered pair for each distributor using the appropriate symbol. Do not use numbers. So we want to write an ordered pair, but we don't want to use numbers. And we're going to do it for each of these, for barking lot grooming and for the tidy pause. So here it is. Barking lot grooming. The ordered pair we have is x and b of x. We just said on number 6 that b of x was the dependent, the y. We also said that p of x was going to be the dependent for the tidy pause. These are the ordered pairs. Okay, number 8 says for us to use the appropriate function notation to evaluate the cost of 6, 9, and 15 bottles of shampoo for each distributor. So we want to know what would it cost if we went over to the parking lot grooming. How much would they charge me for 6 bottles of shampoo? What would they charge for 9? And what would they charge for 15? So let me go back and look up the rule here. We're looking at parking lot grooming. And what we had for parking lot grooming was this right here. That's their rule. 5x plus 3, right? Let me come back over here. Oops, one too many. So over here, forgot about that. Alright, so let's see here. 5x plus 3. This is the rule. This is the rule for parking lot grooming. First thing I want to know is how much would they charge me for 6 bottles? So let's find out. Let's replace x with a 6. And let's see what we get. Put that in your calculator. What is 5 parentheses 6 parentheses plus 3? What is that? 33.
33.
33. So in other words, if I were to buy 6 bottles from them, they're going to charge me $33. What if I buy 9 bottles? Well, let's do that again. This time let's use a 9.
I remember.
Now obviously it's going to be more expensive. So this time they're going to charge, what was it, $48? $48. That's for 9 bottles. And what about if I wanted 15 bottles? What are they going to charge me for 15 bottles? $78. Now, of course, this is specifically talking about that parking lot. What if I go to that other place? What if I go to Tidy Paws? What are they going to charge me? Well, first of all, they don't have the same rule, do they? They don't have 5x plus 3 for them. What did they have instead?
X plus.
It wasn't 5x plus 3. What was it? Go back. 3x plus 21. So that's the rule we're going to use for that. So if I want to know how much they're going to charge me for 6 bottles, I got to make sure I use this function. That's the rule here. So let me replace x with 6. And let's see what we get. $39. So they're going to charge me $39 for 6 bottles. What if I want 9 bottles? What will they charge me? $48. And one more here. What if I want 15 bottles? If I want 15 bottles, it's going to cost me $66. So how much I'm going to pay is going to depend on which place I go to. So let me ask you a question. Which place would you go to buy your shampoo?
First I go to the dog place and then for the rest I go to the other.
What's that?
First go to the dog place and then the other two.
When you say first go to the dog, what do you mean?
Because it's 33 and the other place is 39.
They're both dog places.
Well, yeah, they're both dog places, but which one would you go to if you're going to buy shampoo?
For much.
Actually, that's kind of a trick question, guys. Because if I'm going to buy 6 bottles, 6 bottles of shampoo, which is the best place to go to?
Parking lot.
And why is that? Because it's cheap. It's only $33. What if I want to buy 9 bottles? Which place is the better place to go to? Actually, either one, right? Because they're charging me the same thing. What if I want 15 bottles? Where should I go? Tidy Paws. Why am I going to go over here? Because it's cheaper. So which store I go to is going to depend on
How much you want?
how many bottles I want.
The more you want, go to another one.
That's right. The more you want, you're probably better off going over here to Tidy Paws.
Tiny paws.
Tidy Paws. Number 9. The following function notation was given for parking lot grooming. B of 5 is equal to 28. So they gave me this thing right here. The question is, what the heck does the 5 represent, and what does the 28 represent?
5% the bottom.
What?
The bottoms.
5 is the number of bottles, and then what's the 28 then?
With money.
The cost. Very good. So let's write this down. So 5 is going to be the number of bottles. The 28 is going to be the cost of those 28 bottles. Not 28 bottles, but the 5 bottles. So in other words, if they buy 5 bottles, it's going to cost us $28. Of course, they are talking about parking lot room. And the other one, number 10, very similar, except this time we're talking about tidy policy. P of 10 is equal to 51. What would the 10 be, and what would the 51 be? 10 is the bottles of shampoo. 51 is the price or the cost of those 10 bottles. So 10 is the number of bottles of shampoo. 51, that's the price or the cost of those 10 bottles. All right, we're going to go ahead and stop right there. What you're going to do for me is go back to number 3 and number 4 and finish those up now. Number 3 and number 4. Finish them up.
They do when you're done with the.
And then you can turn it in.
Okay.